Introduction: turning agency into an enforceable contract once agency has been disclosed. The next critical step is formalizing that relationship through a written employment agreement. Disclosure explains the relationship, employment agreements enforce it. In commercial real estate, where transactions are complex and commissions can be substantial, failing to secure a written agreement is one of the biggest risks an agent can take. Under ARES Section 44-1017, any agreement authorizing or employing a broker to buy, sell, or lease real property for compensation must be in writing to be enforceable. This means that without a written agreement, a broker may have no legal right to collect a commission, regardless of the work performed. What is an employment agreement in commercial real estate? An employment agreement is a contract between a broker and a client that establishes the terms of representation and compensation. This includes listing agreements for sellers and landlords, as well as buyer and tenant representation agreements. In commercial real estate, these agreements often go beyond basic terms and include detailed provisions regarding property type, geographic scope, duration, marketing strategies, and compensation structures. The purpose is to clearly define expectations and protect both parties from misunderstandings or disputes. Key elements required for enforceability to be enforceable: an employment agreement must include several essential elements. First, it must clearly identify the parties involved, including the client and the employing broker. Second, it must describe the property or type of property involved. Third, it must outline the compensation structure, including how and when the commission will be earned. Finally, it must be signed by the parties. Without these elements, the agreement may not meet the requirements of ARES Section 44-101, and the broker risks losing their right to compensation. In commercial real estate, where agreements can be highly customized, ensuring these core elements are present is critical. Compensation clarity and risk management. Compensation is one of the most important components of any employment agreement. In commercial real estate, commissions are often negotiated and can vary widely depending on the transaction. The agreement must clearly state how compensation will be calculated, who will pay it, and when it will be earned. Under ACR 4-28-701, brokers are required to disclose all parties who will receive compensation in a transaction. This reinforces the importance of transparency and clarity. For example, if a tenant broker is relying on a commission offered by a landlord, the agreement should address what happens if that commission is reduced or not paid. Without clear terms, disputes can arise that jeopardize both the transaction and the broker's compensation. Duration and protection periods. Employment agreements must also define the duration of the relationship. This includes the start and end dates, as well as any extension or protection periods. In commercial real estate, where transactions can take months or even years, protection periods are especially important. These provisions ensure that the broker is compensated if a transaction is completed after the agreement expires, but as a result of the broker's efforts during the agreement period. Without a protection clause, a client could wait until the agreement expires and then complete the transaction without paying a commission. Common pitfalls and invalid agreements. One of the most common mistakes agents make is relying on verbal agreements or incomplete contracts. Verbal agreements are not enforceable under the statute of frauds, and incomplete agreements may be challenged in court. Another common issue is failing to properly define compensation or leaving key terms ambiguous. In commercial real estate, where deals are complex, ambiguity can lead to significant disputes. Agents must ensure that all terms are clearly defined and that the agreement is fully executed before proceeding with representation. Broker supervision and file compliance. Employment agreements are a critical component of broker supervision. Under ACR 4-28-1103, designated brokers must ensure that all agreements are properly executed, reviewed, and maintained in the transaction file. This includes verifying that the agreement complies with Arizona law and that all required elements are present. Additionally, under ARES Section 32-2151.01, brokers are required to retain these records for a specified period. Proper supervision and record-keeping are essential for compliance and risk management. Real-world application. Commercial scenario. Consider a scenario where a broker spends months working with a commercial tenant, identifying properties, negotiating lease terms, and coordinating due diligence. The tenant ultimately signs a lease, but there was never a written representation agreement in place. The landlord refuses to pay a commission, and the tenant argues there was no obligation to do so. Without a written agreement, the broker may have no legal recourse to recover compensation. This situation highlights the importance of securing a written employment agreement at the outset of the relationship. Bringing it all together, protecting your work employment agreements are the backbone of enforceable agency relationships. They protect the broker's right to compensation, clarify expectations, and reduce the risk of disputes. In commercial real estate, where transactions are complex and high value, having a clear and enforceable agreement is essential. Agents who consistently use well-drafted employment agreements not only protect themselves, but also demonstrate professionalism and confidence. As we move into the next section, we will explore how compensation disclosures and agreements interact within the broader framework of Arizona law. Online discussion: why are written employment agreements critical in commercial real estate? Answer: because they ensure enforceability of compensation and clearly define the terms of the agency relationship. What happens if a broker does not have a written agreement? Answer: the broker may not be able to legally enforce their right to a commission. Why are protection periods important in commercial agreements? Answer: they ensure the broker is compensated for transactions completed after the agreement expires, but resulting from their efforts.